you would not last the night comfortably because, as a junior household servant in a late 14th century English castle, you do not have a bedroom. You have a contested strip of great hall floor, a sinking fire, and a social order that measures rank in feet of warmth. If this sort of honest history helps your evening, you may like or subscribe, but only if you truly mean to return. Tell me where you are listening and the local time there. Let the room grow dim, settle into whatever comfort is actually yours, and follow the last platters away from the high table. The feast is ending. Benches scrape, torches gutter, and your first task is not sleep. It is to claim enough floor before everyone else remembers that the hall is also the household's bedroom. The great hall has spent the evening being public. The lord ate at the high end, his household stretching away along trestle tables, servants moving through screens near kitchen, buttery and pantry. Now public ceremony must be dismantled. You lift a bench with another man, turn sideways through bodies, and carry it toward the wall. Tables on trestles can be struck and shifted because the hall must change jobs. It has been dining room, audience chamber, place for petitions and display of status. Soon it must hold sleeping bodies. The hall floor is your bedroom, dining room, courtroom and throne room at once. You sleep where the day's crumbs and judgments have both landed. This is not evidence that the household has forgotten comfort. It is evidence that one enormous heated room is more useful than dozens of little chambers that would demand walls, roofs, fuel, servants and doors. One large heated room serves more people than a dozen small ones could, which is an argument about fuel and servants before it is an argument about comfort. As tables disappear, the fire becomes a map. Those whose service and standing bring them nearer the high end do not need to announce it. Their places announce it for them. Senior attendants settle where warmth still reaches. Lesser servants drift toward margins, door screens and drafts. You watch blankets open in an order nearly as formal as dinner. The whole social order is redrawn in feet of warmth. You do not challenge it, because a sleeping place is tied to duty as much as privilege. Someone near the entrance may need to answer the gate or carry a message. Someone close to the hearth may be trusted to watch embers. Your own rank is low enough that no one asks your preference, but not so low that you can pretend not to understand. You choose a place neither inviting dispute nor guaranteeing complete numbness. Warmth falls away from a hearth faster than anyone expects, and the good places were claimed by people who learnt that years ago. The rushes under your shoes have softened the stone or hard-packed surface, depending on the part of the hall, and they catch what falls. Medieval households did sweep, clear rubbish, and renew floor coverings. It would be lazy to imagine every floor as a permanent compost heap. Still, rushes are practical rather than magical. They trap crumbs, ash, spilled ale, and fragments from a busy room. A later 16th century visitor, Erasmus, complained with memorable disgust about old material surviving under newer rushes in English houses. He was writing after your century, and he was a sharp-tongued guest, so his complaint must stay in its proper date. Tonight you rake aside the worst of the supper debris and spread your bedding over the cleaner stems. Floor rushes can become an archaeology of supper, though responsible households do sweep and renew them. Rushes and straw were laid over earth or stone where floors were not tiled, and a careful household swept and renewed them rather than letting them accumulate. You test the ground with one knee. The fire warmed the air above it better than the floor beneath it. Stone and earth answer slowly to flame and quickly to winter. Your palm finds a cold that feels stored rather than fresh. The stone keeps the cold the way it keeps everything else, patiently and for generations. A mat, cloak, sack of straw, or folded blanket creates distance, and distance matters. Wealthier sleepers can have thicker mattresses, linen, woolen coverings, perhaps feathers. You have what your station and household issue allow, and what you have managed to keep dry. You smooth it carefully because one ridge of bundled rush can spend all night explaining itself to your ribs. Comfort here is not an object you possess. It is a series of small separations between your body and the building. Erasmus complained about the state of English rush floors in the 16th century, which tells you both that they were common and that standards varied. Across the hall, the screen at the service end checks some of the draught from doors leading toward the kitchen and stores. It does not abolish air. A castle needs passages, stairs, wall walks, arrow loops, gates and openings through which work and defense happen. A fortress is magnificent to defend and miserable to sleep in. Every arrow slit is a small principled enemy of comfort. You feel the result whenever an outer door opens. Cold slides through the screens, folds around ankles, and reaches the fire after visiting everyone first. Smoke shifts. A flame leans. Men glance up without surprise. The building is doing exactly what it was made to do, protecting a household inside thick walls, while refusing the sealed, evenly heated stillness you expect from a modern room. A timber screen at the service end checked the draught from the doors, which is the closest thing to insulation this room contains. Night clothing begins with not removing very much. You loosen what binds, take off wet outer things if you can, keep useful layers, and wrap yourself in cloak and blanket. You dress for bed rather than undress. The night's real opponent is the draught, and it wins on points. There is no single medieval sleeping costume shared by every rank, region, season, and century. What matters is practical. Linen against skin, wool above it, head covered when cold, dry cloth prized. You arrange your cloak so its edge does not invite a neighbor's foot. Boots stay where a hand can find them. A belt, purse, or small possession goes beneath or beside you. Not because everyone here is a thief, but because a communal room makes absent-minded ownership remarkably adventurous. Nothing you own is behind a door tonight. Everything you own is under you, beside you, or currently being worn. More bodies arrive from errands. The hall seems to grow smaller without changing shape. A great aristocratic household can number well over 100, especially when a lord travels with retainers, officers, servants, horses, and baggage. Not all sleep in one hall, and arrangements vary with castle size and season, but private chambers remain scarce. A great household can exceed 100 people, while offering remarkably few doors that close on only one of them. You know who belongs near you by face, livery, task, or repeated habit. Privacy does not mean being unseen. It means that familiar people generally observe the rules of not staring, not touching another's gear, and not turning every human noise into public entertainment. Courtesy is the partition the architecture did not provide. There is no partition to appeal to, so the household relies on manners instead. And manners hold up surprisingly well until somebody is tired enough. The hearth must survive until morning without burning the roof or emptying the wood store. A servant draws larger pieces together, covers parts of the glow with ash, and leaves enough life for dawn. Banking a fire is a judgment, not a dramatic extinction. Too much flame wastes fuel and throws sparks. Too little means cold hands rebuilding from stubborn charcoal before anyone has patience. You watch him use poker and shovel, then set the tools away. The hall darkens by degrees. One torch remains near a necessary passage. Small lamps may travel with those allowed upstairs. Firelight no longer reaches the rafters, and the roof becomes a darkness held on timber. You had hoped the end of the feast would make the room quiet. Instead, it reveals all the smaller sounds the feast had covered. The fire is banked rather than fed, kept alive without being allowed to burn through the night's fuel in the first hour. There is whispering, cloth being shaken, a cough caught and then surrendered, and the scrape of someone still searching for a place. A door closes. Somewhere behind the screen, a vessel rings against stone. You lie down and discover that the hall's size produces no personal silence. Sound travels above low sleepers and returns from timber and masonry. No one expects perfect stillness. A household is a working body, and sleep happens inside it rather than after it. A room of your own would sound eccentric, expensive, and faintly suspicious. Why heat a chamber for one ordinary person, when several can share the hall's remaining warmth? Why place a servant beyond hearing when service depends on being summoned? Your modern expectation of solitude would look less like a right than an inefficient building proposal. Solitude was not withheld from you. It was never built, because building it would have meant walls, roofs, fuel, and servants that nobody could justify. You turn toward the fire, but that exposes your back to moving air. You turn away, and your face cools. The compromise lasts a minute, then someone steps over your feet, and the negotiation begins again. Sleeping near the door means guarding it. Comfort and duty are assigned by the same plan. The men nearest the entrance are not merely unlucky. They may be there because movement, messages, or security belong to their place in the household. A castle does not stop being an administrative and defensive center when the lord retires upstairs. Gates remain secured, watches continue, animals need care, fires require attention, and unexpected arrivals must be judged. Your patch of floor sits inside that chain. If a call comes, the sleepers closest to the route wake first, and the rest learn news from the shape of their movement. The route past the sleepers is fixed, and anyone crossing the hall at night wakes the same handful of people every time. The cold is not constant. It comes in pulses with doors, wind, fire, and bodies shifting. Wool traps warmth, but damp defeats it. The rushes insulate some surfaces. People clustered in one hall also make their own small climate. This is why communal sleeping is not simply a sign of neglect. Shared space can preserve heat and keep servants available. Yet the very solution creates friction. Someone's knee finds your blanket. Someone's heel claims 3 inches that were unquestionably yours before sleep made property law flexible. You tuck cloth beneath yourself and reduce your outline. Nobody apologizes at length. Everyone knows the problem. The castle offers protection through mass, thick walls, guarded access, and a household close enough to act together. It offers comfort through improvisation. Drafts arrive from the doors and the high windows, and the sleepers nearest either learn which way to face long before you do. Before settling fully, you make the sensible journey to the garderobe. In many castles, a latrine closet sits within the wall, with a seat over a chute dropping toward a pit, ditch, or exterior ground, depending on the site. It is not one universal design, and not every chute empties into a moat. Still, the arrangement removes waste without sending you far into the yard. The garderobe's discharge may discourage besiegers by an entirely different route. One dry observation is enough, because the immediate reality is not comic. The chamber is cold, the opening is colder, and the stone seat has achieved a level of winter seriousness the hall floor could only admire. You finish quickly, use what cleansing material the household provides, and return before your place becomes a matter for arbitration. The garderobe is a wall closet with a chute, positioned for the convenience of whoever the building was designed to please. The word itself carries a trap for modern ears. Garderobe could refer to a place for keeping clothes and valuables, a private chamber, or a privy. Wardrobe and garderobe belong to the same linguistic family, so the medieval walk-in closet and the toilet can seem alarmingly close cousins. It is often said that clothes were kept near latrines because ammonia discouraged moths or fleas. The story is repeated far more confidently than the evidence deserves. You should treat it as a familiar claim, not a settled household rule. What is certain is simpler. Clothing, valuables, private rooms, and latrines could all cluster around lordly chambers where security mattered. For you, the garderobe is less a lesson in chemistry than a reminder that even bodily privacy depends on rank, architecture, and access. Garderobe could mean a wardrobe or a privy, and the word shares its history with wardrobe, which is a small lesson in how rooms acquired their names. When you return, a younger page has shifted into the hollow left by your blanket. He is not stealing so much as obeying warmth. You tap his shoulder, point, and wait. He moves half a body width with the resigned dignity of someone who expects the same dispute elsewhere. The exchange ends without a speech. Communal life trains people in tiny adjustments because larger ones are impossible. You lie down again, now closer to a man whose breathing is already deep. Your place is restored but altered. One edge of the bedding folds under. Your shoulder meets colder ground. The hall teaches its challenge, not through a single catastrophe, but through 100 minor defeats that arrive after you are too tired to resent them properly. Nobody has wronged you. The floor is simply first come, and a page who left it has learnt what leaving it costs. Above the hall's high end, behind more restricted doors, the lord and lady can withdraw into a chamber or solar. English castles vary, but surviving plans repeatedly show a great hall connected to a more private room, often placed toward the safer or higher status part of the complex. You imagine their bed, hangings, fire, and latrine. The bed upstairs may be worth more than most of the furniture and still fail to purchase solitude. Chamber servants remain near. Trusted attendants enter. Business follows rank through doors. Even the lord's servant may sleep at the foot of the bed like a loyal draft excluder. The contrast matters, but it is not between lonely luxury and crowded misery. It is between degrees of managed access. Your hall has almost none. Their chamber has rules. Behind the restricted doors above the high end, the household's most senior people are conducting an entirely different night. You pull the blanket over one ear. The other remains available to duty, whether you intend that or not. A servant is valuable partly because he can be reached. Bells and remote systems belong to later arrangements. Here a voice, hand, or messenger must cross real space. Sleeping bodies form a network of readiness. The page near the door can wake the usher. The usher can find a chamber attendant. A guard can call into the hall. This nearness reduces private life, but supports household action. You begin to understand why a castle that looks enormous from outside can feel crowded within. Much of its volume belongs to walls, stairs, stores, halls, chapels, kitchens, towers, passages, and defense. A vast silhouette does not translate into a corridor of private bedrooms. The silhouette from outside suggests corridors of private rooms. Inside, most of the building is hall, service, and storage. The hall's fire settles with a soft inward collapse. Sparks appear briefly and vanish under ash. Someone rises to check them, moving carefully between feet. You recognize him by outline. He kneels, uses the poker once, and returns to his place. No one applauds the prevention of disaster. The household depends on hundreds of actions that earn attention only when omitted. Your own evening has included clearing tables, carrying benches, claiming ground, protecting possessions, and remaining ready. Now your ordinary goal is finally simple. Stay warm enough to sleep before the next obligation. The challenge in the title has no dragon hidden inside it. It has shared air, hard ground, thin margins, broken sleep, and a building whose grandeur belongs chiefly to people looking at it from a distance. Later castles grew showier and more comfortable, with more rooms and residential ranges. But that is a change measured across generations rather than seasons. For a time, you do sleep. It comes without the ceremony of a private bedtime. One moment you are counting breaths around you. The next, the fire has changed shape and your arm is numb. Waking is not failure. Pre-modern nights need not match a modern ideal of 8 silent, uninterrupted hours, and people may stir, pray, tend fires, relieve themselves, or speak quietly. We cannot reconstruct one universal pattern from every century. We can follow the practical evidence of a room that demands interruptions. You flex your fingers beneath the cloak. The man beside you turns. Farther down, someone murmurs a short prayer and grows still. You have crossed a portion of the night, though the darkness above the rafters looks exactly as deep. The rafters give no information about the hour, and neither does anything else in the room. Your hip aches from the floor. You roll onto your back and discover smoke resting higher in the hall, faint now, but present. Open hearths, roof ventilation, windows, and later chimneys took many forms. This hall does not behave like a sealed modern room with invisible heat. Fire gives light, warmth, smoke, risk, and work all together. You judge the air by smell and by what your eyes do when you sit up. Tonight the smoke is tolerable. The draft that torments you also helps move it. Comfort keeps making bargains with safety. A tighter room might be warmer and smokier. A wider opening clears air and admits cold. You lower yourself again, placing your folded sleeve under your neck, an item of clothing promoted to furniture by need. Clothing becomes furniture at this point in the night, and every sleeper here has made the same promotion. Near the high end, a senior retainer has a proper pallet and 2 coverings. He earned or inherited the position that placed them there. Rank appears in cloth as clearly as in distance. Textiles are costly, labor-filled possessions. Wool must be raised, shorn, cleaned, spun, woven, finished, and carried. Linen demands its own chain of work. A thick cover is not a casual extra. You treat yours with care, because replacing it is not a matter of visiting a shop after breakfast. The same is true upstairs, only multiplied. Bed hangings can create a smaller pocket of warmth and display wealth. They also travel or appear in inventories as valuable goods. A grand bed is less an ordinary fixture than a portable concentration of comfort, status, and fabric. A 1488 probate inventory records a standing bed with a running bed beneath it, which is the kind of document that tells you what a bed was worth. The great hall changes temperature as the night deepens. The outer stones lose what little warmth they held. Air settles near the floor where you are. The fire no longer throws heat far enough to make the central spaces equal. You curl tighter, then uncurl when your knee meets the sleeper ahead. This is the personal answer to the challenge. Your body expects softness, stable temperature, darkness on command, silence, a secure bathroom, and the privilege of being unconscious without remaining available. The castle can promise almost none of these at your rank. It gives enclosure, company, guarded walls, and a place in a household. Those are serious benefits. They simply are not the same benefits you call a comfortable night. Thick walls hold their temperature slowly, so the coldest part of the night arrives well after the coldest part of the evening. A faint sound near the screen makes several men lift their heads. It is only a kitchen servant carrying a covered light and returning a vessel. The reaction fades at once. Collective sleeping creates collective alertness. One person's movement becomes everyone's small question until recognized. The gate and wall watch beyond the hall work on the same principle at larger scale. Identify the sound, judge it, pass it onward if needed. You settle after seeing familiar livery. The brief wakefulness costs more than the incident deserves, but sleep does not obey fairness. Your mind begins again with the cold, the position of your purse, the ache in your shoulder, and whether the fire will need tending before dawn. Rumination has found medieval materials and seems pleased with the variety. A hall full of people is never silent, and the mind supplies interpretations for every sound it cannot place. You resist by returning to tasks already completed. The bench is stacked. The table boards are safe. Your cloak is dry enough. The door is barred by those responsible. The Lord has withdrawn. The kitchen fires are being reduced. Each fact closes a small loop. Medieval household life is not a catalogue of dirt and suffering. People wash, sweep, maintain, mend, and seek warmth with the means available. Tonight is difficult because comfort is distributed unevenly, and architecture serves many demands, not because everyone has abandoned care. The rushes beneath you were placed to improve the floor. The screen was built to check drafts. The fire was banked to last. Your blanket exists because many hands made it. The castle's discomfort survives alongside constant efforts to soften it. Households did try to soften this. Screens, Hangings, rushes, and banked fires are all attempts, and none of them makes the floor less hard. Another opening of the door sends a blade of air across the floor. A guard speaks to the sleeper assigned nearest, too low for you to catch every word. There is no alarm. A message has arrived from the outer ward, perhaps about a routine change. The man stands, pulls on boots and goes. His bedding remains as a narrow, dark claim. No one takes it now because duty has marked it. Sleeping near the door means accepting that rest may be interrupted first. When he returns, he carries cold on his clothing and a smell of damp stone. He lowers himself without complaint. The hall absorbs him again. You understand that his place, colder than yours, also carries trust. Rank is not a single ladder of comfort. It is a web of access, obligation, and proximity. Access, obligation, and proximity decide where everyone sleeps, and none of those three is written down anywhere in the building. The hour cannot be read from a bright dial on the wall. You infer it from fire, bells, prayers, watches, and the habits of people who have done this before. Somewhere a clock may exist in a later medieval setting, but the household does not need every sleeper to know an exact minute. It needs the right people awake at the right changes. You listen for a known bell and hear only wind at a high opening. Time stretches when measured by discomfort. The remaining night feels larger than the hall, yet your body has already endured more of it than you notice. Cold makes each waking interval vivid and erases the sleeping ones. Survival, in this modest challenge, consists mainly of continuing until dawn, with no dramatic record of the achievement. There is no clock. The hour is estimated from the fire, the watch, and how long ago the last person crossed the room. You need the garderobe again, and decide the need can wait. Then you decide it cannot. This second journey is harder, because warmth, once collected, is painful to abandon. You rise slowly, feel for boots, and step between bodies. The hall seen from standing height looks like a field after activity. Shapes laid in rows and clusters around the low red heart of the fire. You pass through the darker route, touch the wall for balance, and find the latrine closet. Cold air climbs the chute. There is no reason to linger. On the return, you notice how many sleepers fit into spaces that seemed empty during dinner. Furniture had defined the room by use. Bodies now define it by need. The hall was a public room an hour ago, and is a bedroom now, and it will be a public room again before you have properly woken. Your place is waiting, but the blanket has cooled. You slide beneath it and meet the full stored chill of the floor. The body beside you shifts away by instinct, then settles back when recognizing you. This unspoken accommodation is one of the night's quiet mercies. People who lack walls become skilled at boundaries made from habit. A turned back can be a screen. A folded cloak can mark an edge. A whispered warning prevents a boot from landing on a hand. The absence of private rooms does not mean the absence of personal dignity. It means dignity is negotiated in public, repeatedly, through restraint. You reclaim warmth from your own breath and from the small shared climate of sleepers around you. The warmth you get back is your own, returned by the blanket and by the bodies close enough to share theirs without meaning to. For the lord upstairs, privacy is also negotiated, only with better textiles and stronger doors. He may have a chamber where honoured guests are received, a bedchamber beyond, a latrine close by, perhaps a chapel or further room in a grand complex, yet officers, attendants, family, and trusted servants circulate through these spaces according to rank. The chamber is protected from the whole household, not emptied of people. This matters because your modern question, why did almost nobody have a room of their own, can mislead. Medieval domestic life does not begin with isolated individuals and then reluctantly combine them. It begins with households, service, family, rank, and shared work. Solitude is the unusual arrangement requiring explanation. Even the Lord negotiates privacy, only with better materials. Solitude is the arrangement that needs explaining, not company. The embers need attention before they vanish. A designated servant rises, adds a small piece of wood, and stirs the ash until red returns along one edge. The action brightens faces nearest the hearth, each visible for a breath before shadow restores privacy. You watch the new flame take. Fuel must be conserved, so he does not build a morning blaze yet. The fire's purpose now is continuity. It carries evening into dawn in a form small enough to manage. Your own sleep does the same. It comes in brief returns, never perfect, but sufficient to carry you forward. The room has stopped feeling actively hostile. It has become familiar in its demands. Hardness beneath, cold at edges, breath nearby, duty beyond the door. Hard floor, cold edges, breath nearby, and duty waiting beyond the door. That is the whole inventory of the night. At last a signal passes from outside. A footstep, a low call, then movement among those whose work begins before light. The castle is waking by function rather than all at once. A kitchen servant goes toward the service passage. Someone near the entrance sits up and laces boots. The firekeeper removes more ash. You remain down for another moment, taking the final warmth your blanket has managed to hold. Dawn has not yet reached the windows, but the watch knows it is approaching. The night's challenge is nearly paid. You have not been attacked, poisoned, or lost in a secret passage. You have simply been cold, crowded, repeatedly awakened, and denied control over nearly every condition of sleep. That is enough. The signal comes from outside, from someone whose job is to know the hour when nobody inside can. When you stand, your body reports the floor in sections. Hip, shoulder, neck, and one numb hand submit separate petitions. You roll the blanket tightly, shake rush fragments from it, and secure the bundle. Around you the hall reverses its transformation. Bedding disappears. People step back into roles. A floor that held sleepers will soon hold servants carrying breakfast, officers giving instructions, petitioners waiting, and the household forming itself for another day. No one marks your endurance because everyone around you has endured a version of it. Comfort is not the standard against which the night is judged. Readiness is. Can you rise, dress, answer, carry, serve, watch, cook, or ride? You can, though your shoulder would like its descent entered into the record. Your body will report every hour of this by mid-morning, and the work will proceed regardless of the report. Morning light finds the high windows slowly. It touches smoke, rafters, the edge of the dais, and the disturbed rushes. The hall looks grand again because the evidence of sleeping is being cleared. Visitors will see scale, timber, heraldry, fire, rank, and ordered service. They may not imagine the rows of bodies architecture performs by day and shelters by night, but it reveals different truths in each use. You carry your bundle towards storage and pass the high end where the Lord sat at feast. Distance from that point organized dinner and sleep alike. The castle's public hierarchy did not pause when eyes closed. It became bedding, warmth, access, and interruption. The hall did not stop being the hall. It simply took on a second job after the tables came down. So why would you not survive a night here? At least not in the comfortable sense promised by the title. Because you arrive expecting a castle to behave like a stone hotel. It behaves like a fortified household. Its largest room is communal and multifunctional. Its heat is local. Its surface is hard. Its air mobile. Its sanitation practical but exposed. Its privacy rationed, and its sleeping plan tied to rank and duty. You could physically live through the night, as countless people did. What would fail is your modern definition of a night's rest. By dawn you would be functioning, not refreshed. You would understand that survival in this challenge means adaptation to shared space, not victory over a theatrical danger. Survival here is adaptation to shared space rather than victory over any danger, which is a much less dramatic answer than the question implies. The deeper answer is why almost no one has a room alone. Rooms cost construction, fuel, furnishing, supervision, and distance from the people who may need one another. A medieval great household is organized around presence. Servants must be near calls, guards must be near gates, officers must oversee work, family, guests, and retainers display relationships through access. Later castles and great houses add more chambers as owners seek privacy and comfort, but even then privacy comes by layers: a screen, a stair, an antechamber, a guarded threshold, a bed curtain. The individual sealed bedroom is not the natural starting point. It is a luxury assembled from space, money, heat, and permission. You do not have a room of your own because a room of your own is assembled from space, money, heat, and permission, and you hold none of those four. You set the rolled bedding down and look toward the door at the high end. Beyond it lies the quieter answer to the hall, the sola, or chamber, where the lord and lady withdrew. The distance is only a few steps, but socially it is much farther. You have paid off the title story on the floor. Now the castle's rarest luxury can be examined from the other side of that threshold. A chamber servant is already there, checking the fire, straightening the bed, and preparing to sleep close enough to be summoned. The door closes on most of the household. It does not close on service. The door leads to service, which is where you are going, and it will not be closed against you at any point today. The chamber servant enters before the lord and lady, carrying a covered light. She knows the room by touch as much as sight. The slight rise near the hearth, the chest at the wall, the space beside the bed where cloth must not trail. This is the sola, or one of the castle's private chambers, a withdrawal from the great hall rather than a modern private suite. Her goal is to make it ready, then remain available without appearing to occupy it. The room has a door, which in this household is already nearly a miracle. Yet the servant passes through that door, because privacy belongs to rank, and rank requires people to maintain it. She checks flame, shutters, coverings, basin, and the route to the latrine closet. Nothing is dramatic. Everything must be correct before the owners arrive. The covered flame throws a small circle over the boards, and she moves within it without touching the bed curtains. Beyond the wall, benches scrape in the departing hall. You are not in this room, and will not be. 3 walls away, a different kind of night is being prepared by somebody who also sleeps on a floor. Surviving castles place lordly apartments in varied arrangements, but the pattern is clear enough to follow. The great hall handles public household life. A solar, great chamber, or withdrawing room gives the lord and family a more restricted space to relax, receive selected visitors, conduct business, or sleep. At Richmond, a small solar stood beyond the hall. At Stokesay, a solar block formed a private apartment range. In grander later complexes, several rooms created a sequence, each step limiting access. The chamber servant works inside that sequence. She hears the hall through walls and doors, but its crowd no longer surrounds her. Privacy begins not as silence, but as selection. These people may enter, those people must wait, and only a trusted few can cross without announcement. That narrowing of company is the chamber's central privilege. Space matters, but permission matters more, and the servant is trained to recognize the difference before anyone states it. You would need permission to be here, and permission matters more than any lock. The servant knows the difference without being told. She closes the shutters where they are meant to close, and inspects the fabric around the bed. Bed curtains and hangings make a warmer enclosure within a cold chamber. They also display wealth because woven cloth, embroidery, dyed wool, linen and fur represent land, labor, trade and skilled hands. The chamber's comfort is therefore visible capital. It can be packed, inventoried, inherited, and sometimes carried between residences. Great lords and ladies often travel rather than live permanently in one castle, bringing people, horses, carts, clothing, plate, and valuable furnishings. The room is private, but the household is mobile. Comfort must be assembled when its owners arrive and protected when they leave. She lifts one hanging away from the wall, and feels for damp at its lower edge. A beautiful textile left against wet masonry can become an expensive problem by morning. Nothing you own could be damaged by damp masonry, which is one small advantage of owning almost nothing. The bed itself is high enough to command attention. Not every medieval bed is a monumental four-poster, and surviving examples can mislead because expensive furniture is more likely to be preserved. Written inventories show variety: standing beds, pallets, mattresses, blankets, hangings, and lower running or trundle beds. The servant smooths the top covering and checks that the linen beneath is dry. She has no romantic illusion that size makes sleep simple. A large bed can hold spouses, children in some circumstances, or attendants nearby. It may be used for receiving people as well as sleeping. The room's finest object is also a workplace, a stage of rank, and a small climate controlled by curtains. The mattress does not float above ordinary labor. It has been filled, carried, aired, turned, and covered by hands whose own beds will be much simpler than this one. Everything about that bed was carried, filled, aired, turned, and covered by people whose own beds look a great deal more like yours. Near the foot or side, a low bed can be drawn out for an attendant. Late medieval inventories record running or trundle beds beneath larger standing beds, used by children, servants, or others in the household. The exact arrangement differs by house and date, so no single servant must be imagined in every lord's chamber. Here the chamber servant checks the low frame and its bedding, because tonight she is assigned close attendance. Her position is materially better than the rush-covered hall floor. It is also a statement that the lord and lady are not meant to be unreachable. The servant's sleep is part of their comfort, which is an elegant arrangement provided one is not the servant. When the frame rolls clear, its scale makes the hierarchy almost tenderly obvious. The attendant is wanted close enough to answer, and low enough not to dominate the room. You sleep on rushes. She sleeps on a low bed on wheels that slides away in the morning, and that is the whole distance between you. She places her folded outer garment where it can be reached without noise. Service at night depends on anticipation. Water, light, clothing, a chamber pot, or access to the garderobe, a message from an officer, a response to illness, prayer, cold, or an unexpected call may require her. The household has no electric bell connecting sealed rooms to distant staff. Human proximity is the mechanism. The servant must sleep lightly enough to hear a voice through curtains. Privacy for the lord is therefore produced by another person's reduced privacy. He can withdraw because she remains on the threshold between withdrawal and the larger household. She also listens for the outer servant's step beyond the door. The arrangement creates a human chain, each sleeper near enough to summon the next level of help. The chain runs from the bed outward, each sleeper close enough to be summoned by the one above, ending somewhere near the floor you are lying on. The lord enters tired rather than theatrical. He has spent the evening visible at the high table, receiving deference, speaking to guests, and embodying the household's order. Withdrawal is relief from performance, not escape from responsibility. The servant takes his outer garment, keeps valuables under established control, and listens for instructions. He is not a cartoon tyrant demanding impossible luxuries. He is a man whose status places him under constant observation, and whose chamber offers the closest thing to a smaller life. He asks about an early message expected at dawn. The servant confirms who will bring it. Even here, the next day's administration has already found the bed. He warms his hands before the smaller fire and says little. The chamber permits that silence because everyone present already understands which buckle, paper, and message belongs where. You would have had to be told all of it twice. Long service has already sorted out which buckle and which message belongs where, without a word being said. The lady follows with her attendant, and the chamber becomes more crowded without becoming public. Clothing is loosened, hair covered or arranged for the night according to circumstance. hands and faces washed with available water. Medieval people did wash. The stale myth that an entire age avoided water is both false and unhelpful. Frequency, facilities, privacy, season, and rank varied, but care of the body belonged to daily life. The basin is practical, the cloth clean, the water no longer warm. The lady uses it without expecting a tiled bathroom beyond another door. Comfort is measured against the alternatives available in her world, not against plumbing 7 centuries away. The attendant wrings the washing cloth into a bowl and sets it aside for removal. No grand theory of cleanliness is needed. The night's ordinary care is visible in the used water. You washed in whatever was left in the hall, if you washed at all. The used water in that basin is more than the hall will produce all night. A wall latrine or garderobe near a private chamber is itself a luxury of access. Lordly apartments could include a bedroom, a nearby latrine, and a chamber for visitors. At other sites, latrine closets sit within thick walls and discharge through chutes. The chamber servant checks the passage and leaves light where it can be safely used. The feature does not make the room fragrant or warm. It does spare the owners a journey through communal space at night. Privacy here is the right to meet an ordinary need without crossing the hall. That modest advantage explains more about status than a jewel set on the table. She tests the latch and returns without comment. The shortest route to relief is one more advantage, whose value grows sharply after the hall has gone dark. You walked a considerable distance in the dark for the same relief that is 4 steps from that bed. The fire is smaller than the hall hearth, but its heat belongs to fewer people. This is the chamber's great arithmetic, a private fireplace, where the architecture provides one, concentrates fuel and attention. Shutters, hangings, wall coverings and bed curtains reduce movement of cold air. None creates modern insulation. The masonry still stores winter, smoke and draft still need management, yet the servant can feel the difference as she kneels to adjust a log. The room rewards every layer: a door, a screen, a curtain, a wool covering, another body. Luxury is cumulative. It rarely arrives as one perfect invention. Fuel remains an estate resource, even in this smaller hearth. The servant adds what is needed, not a theatrical blaze, and watches the new flame catch behind the guard. Your fire is banked and shared by 40 people. This one is small, enclosed, and tended by someone paid to stay awake for it. The lord sits on the bed edge, while a servant removes boots. For a moment he is simply tired, 1 foot bare, discussing whether a document can wait until morning. The chamber makes such ordinary humanity visible to a trusted few. In the hall he was position and ceremony. Here he can be indecisive, sore, quiet. This intimacy is another reason access is controlled. A private chamber protects not only possessions and warmth, but the owner's unperformed self. The servant sees it and must treat what she sees as part of her duty. Discretion is an invisible wall stronger than timber when it works. His exposed foot looks no more lordly than anyone else's. The servant lowers her eyes, finishes the task, and restores the clothing that lets rank become visible again. You undress by taking off almost nothing. Here rank becomes invisible for a few minutes, and visible again the moment the clothing is restored. The lady asks for one more covering. The attendant lifts folded wool from a chest. Chests are central furniture because they store textiles and valuables and can travel. A castle room may look sparse by modern standards, while holding extraordinary wealth in cloth, plate, clothing, and bedding. The servant lays the covering evenly so no heavy edge pulls at night. The task is small but skilled. Textiles must be aired, guarded from damp, mended, and counted. Comfort consumes labor before anyone lies down. The chamber appears restful because other people have carried its rest into place. The chest lid closes with controlled weight. Its ironwork, timber, and contents must all survive travel, damp, hurried departures, and the daily reach of many authorized hands. Your possessions travel in what you are wearing. These chests had to survive travel, damp, hurried departures, and the daily reach of many authorized hands. A messenger reaches the outer door and does not enter. He speaks to an officer or waiting servant who passes the message inward. This relay shows privacy in action. The chamber is not sealed from government, it filters government. Names, petitions, accounts and decisions approach through ranks until only what matters crosses the final threshold. The Lord listens, gives a brief answer, and returns to preparation for bed. The messenger never sees him without ceremony. The chamber servant does. Access is a form of power on both sides. The Lord controls who enters, and the trusted servant gains knowledge by being near. The answer travels back through the same layers that brought the question. By morning, the decision may look immediate, though several wakeful people have carried it. You would never see the message arrive. It stops at the outer door, because the door is the boundary, and the boundary is the entire point. When the outer attendants leave, the room seems suddenly spacious. It is not empty. The lord, lady, chamber servant, and perhaps another trusted attendant remain, with people close beyond the door. The idea that nobility automatically meant solitude dissolves. Medieval elite life could be intensely communal, with shared beds, attendants in chambers, visitors admitted for business, and servants sleeping nearby. Later households gradually created more corridors, specialized rooms, and hidden service routes. In this late medieval chamber, privacy means fewer witnesses, not none. The Lord has escaped the hall's 100 eyes and kept 4. The remaining 4 are not equal witnesses. Each has a reason to be present, a duty to perform, and limits on what may be repeated outside the room. You share your room with the whole household. This one empties to 3 people, each with a reason to be there, and a limit on what leaves with them. The servant lowers the light. Firelight catches the bed curtains and the edge of a chest. She pulls out the low bed. Small wheels or a low frame allow it to fit beneath the larger one by day. The motion is quiet from practice. She arranges a modest mattress and covering, better than the hall floor but close to the door and the owner's bed. Her place is both privileged and constrained. She sleeps inside the household's most restricted space, yet she is present for another person's needs. Status can grant access without granting ease. She checks that the low frame cannot catch the hem of a hanging. In close quarters, comfort depends on preventing small collisions before darkness makes them noisy. You have nothing to put away. Here the last task before dark is placing everything where a hand can find it without looking. The lord and lady settle behind curtains. Their voices become softer, then stop. The servant lies down fully clothed enough to rise quickly. She knows the nearest route to the light, the latch, the water, the garderobe and the outer attendant. Her map of the chamber is made from service. There is no spare corner that exists only for her. Even her low bed disappears beneath the great bed in daylight. The furniture performs the social order. The larger bed remains visible and richly dressed. The servant's bed rolls out when needed and vanishes when not. It is difficult to find a clearer picture of privacy as a luxury built on somebody else's availability. Her last conscious view is the lower edge of the great curtains. They conceal the owners without separating them from the person assigned to hear their smallest request. You have no curtain. Theirs conceals without separating, leaving them still within reach of the person assigned to hear them. During the first quiet stretch, a log shifts. The servant wakes, waits, and decides the fire is safe. She does not rise. The chamber holds sound differently from the hall. One cough is distinct. Fabric rustles close. Wind presses at shutters. The very quiet that luxury has purchased can make each small noise more noticeable. Her sleep is lighter because responsibility is concentrated. In the hall, many people could react. Here she is one of very few. Better bedding has not abolished duty. It has placed duty on a softer surface. The servant measures the pause after the sound, then lets her shoulders settle again. Experience teaches which noises demand movement and which belong to an old building cooling. You learnt the hall's night sounds the same way she learnt this room's, by lying awake through enough of them to stop guessing. The lady wakes and asks for water. The servant rises before the second call, finds the vessel, and passes it through the curtain opening without flooding the room with light. The action lasts less than a minute. Its importance lies in readiness. A private chamber does not work because walls alone create comfort. It works because someone supplies water, tends fire, handles clothing, controls entry, and responds at night. Architecture and service are one system. Without either, the chamber becomes a cold stone box with an expensive bed in it. She replaces the vessel exactly where her hand can find it again. Repetition is useful at night. When a misplaced cup can wake everyone the room was designed to shelter. You would have gone without rather than wake anyone. A misplaced cup here would wake the room the whole arrangement exists to protect. Near dawn, the expected message arrives. It stops at the threshold, then passes inward. The Lord wakes enough to hear, gives an answer, and lies back. The chamber servant carries the reply outward and returns to her low bed. She has crossed the privacy boundary twice without breaking it because she is part of its machinery. The castle below remains mostly asleep. Above it, government has moved through a door in whispers. This is not dramatic court politics. It is the ordinary persistence of lordship into the night. The reply is only a few words. Its passage nevertheless joins chamber, corridor, officer, and waiting messenger, proving how much household machinery can move almost silently. You will hear none of it. The message crosses chamber, corridor, officer, and messenger almost silently, which is the machinery working as intended. Morning begins when the servant pushes back her covering and slides the low bed away. Her sleeping place disappears before the owners rise. She rebuilds the room's daytime appearance. Great bed central, floor clear, garments ready, water renewed, light strengthened. The room again suggests that privacy and comfort simply exist. The night's labour has been folded out of sight. The servant's reward is not ownership of the chamber, but trusted place within it. She knows its vulnerable hours and helps convert them back into ceremony. She folds her covering before daylight can display it as disorder. The disappearing bed leaves no obvious sign that another adult has shared the lordly chamber all night. You are already awake by now. The low bed rolls away, and the room shows no sign that another adult spent the night in it. The payoff is plain. The solar is the castle's rare private world, but it is not a room of one person's own. It is a controlled household within the household. The lord and lady gain warmth, security, restricted access, and relief from the great hall. They do not gain isolation. A servant sleeps close, another waits beyond. Messages can cross, family may share space, and valuable objects demand care. Privacy in the medieval castle is not emptiness. It is the authority to decide who remains. That authority remains incomplete and human. Cold enters, sleep breaks, servants hear, family needs intrude, and the next day's work waits immediately outside the chosen door. You are not the only one whose night was partial. Sleep breaks here too, servants hear, and the next day waits immediately outside the door. As the chamber wakes, the servant opens the door toward the service route. Air from the wider castle enters, carrying the first signs of kitchen work. The private room depends on everything beyond it. Wood cut and carried, water drawn, bread stored, ale guarded, meat dressed, vessels scrubbed, accounts kept. The night in the solar closes with blankets straightened and clothing prepared. Down near the great hall, another group is finishing a much larger task. The kitchens that produced the feast must now make themselves safe, orderly, and ready to begin again. The kitchen air is warmer and less guarded. The servant hands over one small request for morning, then returns to dress the room while pans begin to move below. Below, pans begin to move, which is the sound of your morning starting, whether or not you are ready for it. The undercook stands in a kitchen that looks as if the feast has passed through it as weather. Pots are blackened, boards wet, spits slowed, knives gathered for cleaning, and the great hearths have fallen from raw to red depth. The feast ends in the hall. In the kitchen it merely changes jobs. His goal is to bank the fires, account for what remains, secure food and drink, clear dangerous waste, and leave enough order that dawn work can begin without hunting for every tool. A large castle kitchen can be enormous. At Kenilworth, John of Gaunt's late 14th century kitchen was built with several great fireplaces and capacity to serve hundreds. Not every castle matched it. The scale shows what elite hospitality could demand. One servant carries away a basin of cloudy water, while another loosens the weight from a turning mechanism. The undercook assigns the next action with a glance and a name. A room this large becomes safer by shrinking its activity in a deliberate order, station after station. The kitchen is a working building in its own right, and at Kenilworth John of Gaunt's measured roughly 19 meters by 8.5. He begins with fire because fire decides the pace of everything else. Roasting, boiling, baking, heating water, and warming sauces require different heat and timing. Now the flames must be reduced without wasting useful embers. He rakes coals inward, separates what must die from what can be covered in ash, and checks for sparks where grease has fallen. Kitchen hearths are tools and hazards together. Stone surrounds them, but roofs, beams, baskets, cloths, and stored fuel remain vulnerable. Banking down is not abandonment. It is skilled transfer from active cooking to safe continuity. He uses a long tool where the heat remains fierce, and his boot where a stray fragment has cooled. Ash rises, then settles on the hearth edge. The surviving glow must be useful without being allowed to wander into straw, kindling, or the tired carelessness of late work. Pantry, buttery, larder, scullery, pastry, and dresser each had their own space, because feeding several hundred people is not one job but many. Another servant carries a tub toward the drain. Surviving kitchen remains at Kenilworth include a cobbled floor and central drain for waste. In a working kitchen, water and refuse must move somewhere, and the route matters. The undercook scrapes a board, gathers bones and usable scraps into separate containers, and sends what belongs elsewhere on its proper path. Large households develop routines because confusion attracts vermin, loses food, creates smells, and makes mourning harder. Order is not cosmetic. It protects stores and labor. The categories matter because each destination leads to another person and another decision. A bone suitable for stock is not treated like ash. A damaged vessel is not hidden among sound ones. The evening's disorder becomes manageable only when workers name what each thing now is. Cool, dark cellars kept what would otherwise spoil, and their position was decided by the same practical logic as everything else here. The pantry, buttery, larder, scullery, pastry, and dresser divide work by material and responsibility. Names and exact layouts vary, but castle plans repeatedly place service rooms near the low end of the hall. At Richmond, doors connected the great hall to kitchen, buttery, and pantry. At Warkworth, the low end led toward those same functions behind screens. The undercook carries a covered dish through the service route, not into one undifferentiated back room. Bread belongs under one officer's eye, drink under another, meat and other provisions in suitable storage. The castle's abundance depends on boundaries as much as the chamber's privacy did. He passes under the screenward side of the hall, where service movement could be partly separated from the diner's view and from the strongest draught through the entrance. The architecture helps food travel quickly while preserving the ceremony that made its arrival appear effortless. The hall's high and low ends were not decoration. They organized who sat where, who was served first, and who walked furthest to fetch it. In the buttery, ale and wine are guarded, measured, and issued. The word comes from butts, the barrels associated with drink, not from dairy butter. The undercook does not linger. He delivers a vessel, confirms what has been returned from the hall, and receives a short instruction about morning supply. A great household consumes drink in quantity because ale and wine are part of diet, hospitality, wages, and ceremony. Exact amounts vary too much to invent for this night. What matters is the chain. Cellar to buttery, buttery to hall, hall back to account. Every cup at the feast has an unseen route behind it. The returned vessel is less interesting than the mark, memory, or spoken confirmation that accounts for it. Household control does not require every worker to read a modern ledger. It requires recognizable measures, trusted officers, and repeated habits strong enough to reveal when something is missing. The screen's passage kept the draught and the smell of the service end out of the room where the household ate. The pantry holds bread and related service. Trenchers of bread may have served as plates at elite meals, absorbing juices before being distributed or reused according to household custom. The undercook checks baskets and covered loaves, separating fresh supply from pieces designated for another use. Bread is not background, it is planned, baked, counted, carried, cut, served, and preserved from damp and animals. A feast's apparent ease depends on these quiet inventories. The hall celebrated abundance. The pantry must explain what abundance cost and what remains. He feels one loaf through its cloth and leaves it covered. The point is not to make old bread sound precious beyond reason. It is to remember that grain passed through rent, purchase, milling, fuel, baking, and carrying before anyone at the high table broke a piece. Eating was a principal function of the great hall, which is why the room is shaped the way it is and why it empties so slowly. Cool, dark cellars provide better conditions for larders and drink stores. At Kenilworth, service rooms and cellars were arranged beside the great hall complex, with buttery and pantry above cooler storage. The undercook descends a few steps carrying a lamp shielded from draught. Temperature changes before the light reaches the floor. He checks a door bar, looks at suspended or covered provisions, and confirms that nothing has been left exposed. Storage is a nightly defense against spoilage, theft, damp, and hungry creatures. The outer wall protects the site, while the storekeeper's latch protects provisions from loss before sunrise. The lamp reveals only the nearest cask and the pale edge of a covered container. He keeps the flame away from dry material and does not disturb what has already been checked. Coolness helps, but order tells the next servant which provision should move first. A castle was a residence, a court, an administrative centre, and a status symbol, and only sometimes a place expecting an attack. Meat dominates many elite feast records because it displays wealth and lordship. Though diets vary by season, fast days, region, status, and supply. The undercook handles leftovers according to instructions, not personal appetite. Some pieces may be reserved, recooked, distributed within the household, given as alms, or sent to animals, depending on condition and custom. The evidence does not let us follow every scrap from one particular table. It supports a simpler conclusion. A well-run household had reasons to sort food rather than treat the entire feast as disposable. Instructions may also reflect the calendar. A fast day changes what can be served, while a visit, hunt, court session, or large household arrival changes quantity. Tonight's remains belong to tomorrow's decisions, and the undercook protects that flexibility by keeping sound food separate from spoiled matter. Many masonry castles never had a solely military purpose, which is a useful corrective to the shape they make against the sky. He returns to the main kitchen where spits are being cleaned. A roasting spit carries weight, heat, grease, and the labor of turning. Mechanical devices existed in some contexts, but human and animal power remained common across periods. Tonight a servant wipes metal while it is still warm enough to clean more easily. Another scours a pot with abrasive material and water. The undercook checks edges and counts knives before they vanish into darkness. Tools are valuable, dangerous, and shared. Morning confusion begins at night, when one person leaves a blade when no one expects it. He runs a cloth along the spit and turns it so the remaining grease catches the light. The work is repetitive but not vague. Each groove, hook, and balance point affects the next roasting. A neglected tool returns as wasted time precisely when the hearth is hottest. Defensive duty still existed, The wall walk manned, the gate secured, the well guarded, all through the night you have just spent on the floor. The bread oven retains heat after active baking. The undercook closes what must be closed and leaves the oven to cool at its own pace. Residual warmth can be useful, but tonight he gives it no invented second purpose. He simply respects it. Medieval kitchens are environments of gradients. Fierce heat near hearths, damp near washing, cool in cellars, draught in passages, smoke above, grease underhand. Workers learn those gradients bodily. Their knowledge appears in where they stand, when they lift, what they cover, and how long they wait. He checks the oven mouth for a last time and moves the peel away from the traffic line. Around him, zones of heat are collapsing at different speeds. The workers know which stone can still burn a palm, which handle remains safe, and which closed door must stay closed. A watchman's house near the entrance meant somebody was always awake, which is how the signal reached the hall at the right hour. A boy arrives from the hall with the last stack of wooden or metal vessels assigned to this service. The undercook receives them and compares the number with expectation. Elite tables could display silver or silver-gilt pieces, while ordinary household service used a range of pottery, wood, pewter, and other materials according to time and rank. Valuable plate belongs under stricter control than a common bowl. He sends each object toward the correct keeper. The kitchen does not own everything it touches. It is a crossing point where goods arrive under one authority and leave under another. The boy waits until the count is accepted before leaving. He is not merely carrying dishes, he is crossing an administrative boundary. A missing cup can become accusation, expense, or delay, so the ordinary courtesy of counting protects the carrier as well as the household. Wall walks, latrine closets, and garderobe chutes are all recorded in surviving fabric, which is how any of this can be described at all. Fuel is checked next. A major kitchen consumes wood or charcoal at a rate that demands planning far beyond one night. Trees must be managed, timber cut, split, dried, carted, stacked, and issued. The undercook looks at the remaining billets near the hearth and orders only enough left close for morning. Too much fuel beside flame is risk. Too little makes dawn waste time. The wider store stays separate. This small choice connects the kitchen to woodland, estate labor, transport, and account keeping. Though the undercook experiences it as a practical question of how many pieces will be needed before sunrise. The billets are dry enough for purpose, because somebody selected and sheltered them earlier. Fuel quality changes smoke, heat, and labor. The undercook does not need the estate account in his hand to feel that chain. He sees it in a log that catches cleanly, or refuses. The private quarters at Old Saw Manor include a solar, a latrine, and a private chapel, which is a fair picture of what privacy actually consisted of. Water has its own chain. Wells within defended sites mattered because a castle without secure water could not endure ordinary life, much less siege. Servants draw, carry, heat, pour, and discard it by hand. The undercook rinses a cloth, watches the final dirty water leave toward the proper drain, and sets the vessel upside down. No tap erases the distance between source and basin. Every unnecessary bucket has weight. Economy is learned in shoulders as well as accounts. The empty vessel is still heavy enough to pull at his fingers. He sets it near the place where the dawn carrier expects to find it. The night's last act with water prepares the morning's first, turning repeated journeys into a rhythm the whole kitchen can anticipate. At Okehampton, 14th century upper rooms could combine a private latrine, a fireplace, and a window seat in a single chamber. The kitchen quiets when the loudest work is finished, but smell remains layered in stone and timber. Smoke, fat, bread, ale, wet ash, herbs, damp cloth. The undercook does not pause to admire it. He walks the perimeter, checking latches, embers, tools, and stores. Action narrows as the story descends. Each completed check removes a future problem. The hall above or beyond has become a sleeping room. The solar has closed its door. The kitchen's own night begins only when dangerous heat is contained and useful food is protected. He tests one door with his shoulder rather than trusting its appearance. A latch can sit in place without holding. The pressure answers him, and he continues. Behind each secured barrier lies something already cleaned, counted, cooled, or covered, which is why the final walk can stay slow. The solar sat above the service rooms, warmed partly by what was happening beneath it, which is an efficiency nobody would advertise. He covers the last embers with ash. A faint red line survives beneath grey, enough to help the morning if conditions allow. Banking the fire links one workday to the next. The same household that appears to sleep is never fully inactive. Guards walk, servants remain near chambers, and kitchen warmth is preserved in controlled form. The undercook's task has no public ceremony. Guests saw dishes arrive, not coals managed after they left. Yet the feast would be impossible without this less visible half. A younger worker watches how thickly the ash is laid and where a narrow breathing space remains. Such knowledge travels through demonstration as much as command. Tomorrow's fire is not guaranteed, but the careful arrangement gives it a better chance than a heap left open to consume itself. Growing households and a growing appetite for privacy pushed castles toward more rooms across the later medieval period. Before leaving, he gives the keys or confirms them with the officer responsible. Medieval household administration uses named offices because resources are power. The steward oversees broad domestic affairs. The chamberlain manages chambers and access. The butler or buttery staff controls drink. Pantry and kitchen have their own duties. Titles shift across households, but responsibility is distributed so loss can be noticed and work coordinated. The undercook is one part of that structure. He cannot declare the kitchen finished by feeling. He must hand it over in a condition others recognize. The key ring changes hands with a muted weight. Responsibility becomes visible for a moment, then disappears into the officer's clothing. The undercook reports one cracked vessel and a quantity set aside. Small facts that allow the next watch of household management to begin informed. That change arrived slowly and unevenly, and it had not reached the floor of this hall on this particular night. The payoff comes in the quiet after the feast. A castle does not feed a crowd through the work of one cook alone. It feeds people through architecture, stores, fuel, water, officers, servants, routes, timing, and repeated checks. The undercook closes the service door behind him. The fires are low, the bread covered, drink secured, tools counted, waste moved, and morning wood set aside. The sleeping castle rests on completed logistics. Above the kitchen roofs and beyond the hall, one part of the household still moves in the open air. The night watch begins another slow circuit along the wall. He pauses outside the closed door long enough to hear that no one has called him back. Behind it, heat settles through stone and metal. Ahead, a passage leads toward cooler air. His goal was not silence itself, but a kitchen made safe enough that silence can be allowed. The trundle bed is attested in English from the 15th century, a low bed on small wheels kept beneath a higher one. The watchman steps onto the wall walk with a cloak fastened close and a covered lantern used only where light will not ruin his sight into darkness. Wind reaches him without crossing a crowded hall first. The stone beneath his boots is cold, the parapet colder under a resting hand. His goal is simple: complete the circuit, check gate, wall, and vulnerable routes, exchange the expected words with the next guard, and remain alert until dawn. Castle walls are not scenery from up here. They are working surfaces built for observation, movement, and defense. Their height gives view and exposure together. He waits at the stairhead until his eyes adjust. Light from below would make the outer darkness harder to read, so the lantern stays hooded. The first stretch of the round is a change of senses as much as place. Hearth warmth leaves his back, wind reaches his face, and every sound gains distance. The stair door closes behind him, leaving the interior glow as a thin line. beds and bedding carried financial, social and symbolic value, which is why they turn up in wills with the precision of jewellery. He begins near the gatehouse. The main gate has been closed and secured, its bars, doors and mechanisms under the care of men assigned to them. A castle can contain halls, chapels, kitchens, stores and chambers, but the gate decides who crosses between household and outside world. The watchman checks what can be checked without disturbing settled mechanisms. He listens for horses in the outer spaces, movement near the entrance, water, wind, and voices that belong. Familiar sounds are part of security because alarm begins with difference. The gatehouse contains more than a door. Chambers, stairs, guard positions, and defensive devices may gather around the entrance according to the castle's age and design. He does not test every fitting on every circuit. He verifies the parts assigned to the watch and notes anything that morning work must inspect more closely. The Great Hall concentrated the household's community and its warmth, and in cold months it was a genuinely valued place to sleep. From the wall, the castle's plan becomes a set of obligations. Towers break the line so defenders can see along walls. Parapets protect while allowing observation. Arrow loops and later gun openings answer changing weapons. A ditch or moat, where present, complicates approach. None of this guarantees safety. Fortification buys time, visibility, and advantage. The watchman's body supplies the attention the masonry lacks. A high wall cannot notice a loose shutter, a strange light, or a gate left wrong. Stone defends only when people maintain and use it. He looks through an opening along the face of the wall, then across the ground beyond it. The two views answer different risks. Flanking positions reduce blind approaches near masonry, while height reveals movement farther out. The advantage is real, but only while a watcher keeps returning his attention to both distances. His next step carries him past another seam where repaired masonry meets older work. Being close to the fire is worth more than being alone, and everyone who slept here would have agreed without hesitation. He passes above the sleeping Great Hall. The roof lies dark beneath him, hiding the bodies spread around the banked hearth. He cannot see the junior servant turning under a cloak, but he knows the household is there. The chamber range shows one faint protected light. The kitchen gives off less glow than before. The castle below is not silent. It breathes through small sounds: a door, a horse, embers shifting, wind touching timber. The watchman reads the whole as he walks. The knowledge comforts no one directly. It simply lets him distinguish the household's resting noises from a sound that ought not be there. A dog shifts below. Tack knocks once against timber. Somewhere inside, a sleeper coughs. Each sound settles back into its known place, and his pace remains even. Nothing in the view asks for alarm, so he gives it time instead. Servants, guests, and family occupied one building, and 4 or 5 quite different experiences of it. A second guard waits at a tower or turning point. They exchange recognition quietly. Exact watchwords and procedures vary by lordship, garrison, threat, and period, so there is no need to invent one. The essential action is confirmation. The expected man is in the expected place, awake, equipped, and aware of anything unusual. They speak briefly about the wind and a routine movement near the yard. Then each continues. Security is made from repeated ordinary confirmations long before it becomes a battle. The other guard has already examined the adjoining stretch, and the exchange prevents a gap from being silently inherited. Neither man makes a speech about vigilance. A short report is enough. Gate quiet, yard quiet, one lamp where it should be, no movement on the road. The round continues, because the report is complete. The Lord's chamber and your patch of floor are the same household operating at 2 different distances from the fire. The watchman reaches a section where the wall overlooks the approach. Darkness reduces distance. In daylight, a trained observer may see riders or movement far across open ground. At night, terrain becomes blocks of deeper and lighter shadow. He uses hearing and patience. A cloud shifts. The outline of a tree returns. Nothing advances. The absence of an event still requires work, because he cannot know it is absence until he has attended to it. His eyes do not hold the whole landscape at once. They rest on the road, then the ditch edge, then a patch of open ground. He listens between each look. Patient observation turns darkness into separate areas rather than one threatening mass, and each area remains ordinary when nothing changes within it. The road remains empty, and the darkness around it becomes less difficult to separate. Nothing about the arrangement was thought cruel. It was simply what a building of this kind could offer the number of people inside it. Cold gathers first in his hands. He flexes fingers inside cloth and keeps moving. Armor and weapons, where carried, add weight and conduct cold differently from wool and leather. No single outfit can stand for every watchman. Castle security might involve household retainers, soldiers, gatekeepers, constables, and local obligations, depending on context. Tonight he is equipped for routine guard, not a siege tableau. His discomfort comes from exposure and duration, not from a cinematic enemy waiting beyond the wall. He keeps his shoulders loose, so stiffness does not shorten his step. Stopping entirely would preserve heat for a moment and invite drowsiness soon after. Movement is his simplest defense against both. The round has no audience, and its discipline consists largely of doing the unremarkable thing again before the body objects. Warmth returns slowly to moving fingers, never enough to make him forget the air. Trusted servants and honored guests could enter the private apartments, which means the boundary was social rather than architectural. At the well or protected water source, he pauses to check that the route remains clear. Gate, wall walk, and well belong to the same defensive plan. Water is ordinary every day and decisive in crisis. The watchman sees the cover, rope, or surrounding space in darkness and moves on. A defensive castle protects necessities as carefully as entrances. The household below can sleep because somebody remembers which ordinary things cannot be lost. A protected well may lie within the enclosure, or another secure arrangement may serve the household. Whatever the exact layout, water has to remain reachable. He checks the approach rather than drawing any. The bucket, rope, cover, and surrounding ground belong to daytime labor. At this hour their undisturbed condition is the useful fact. He notes no damage, no obstruction, and no reason to wake the sleeping yard. The chamber for receiving visitors sat between the private rooms and everything else, doing the work a modern corridor would do. The circuit returns toward the gate. He notices a faint change in wind direction from smoke moving above roofs. The kitchen fires are low. The hall hearth remains alive. No sudden glow marks trouble. Fire watch and guard duty overlap because a blaze inside walls can be as dangerous as an attacker outside. He studies roof lines for another moment, then descends a few steps where stone blocks the wind. The relief lasts only while the stair turns. Smoke makes a low banner, visible now and then against a lighter patch of sky. Its direction tells him what the wind is doing among the roofs. Its amount tells him only enough to keep watching. He avoids conclusions larger than the signs. The safest quiet night is assembled from many modest observations. The roofs keep their ordinary darkness, and he resumes the measured pace of the round. By morning the hall has returned to being a hall, and the evidence of the night is swept up with the rushes. Time passes through movement. He counts sections of wall, known turns, doors, and exchanges rather than minutes. A bell from a chapel or town may mark an office or hour, depending on place and arrangement, but his body also knows the night by fatigue. The first circuit felt sharp. The next becomes familiar. Attention must survive familiarity. He changes the order of what he notices, looking at latch, ground, roof, horizon, then listening before the next step. He passes the same merlon and opening, but the view is not identical. Clouds have moved. The yard lamp has burned lower. The horse that stood has settled. Repetition gives him comparison, and comparison keeps the circuit from becoming empty walking. Change need not be dangerous to deserve notice. The building will do this again tonight, and the night after, for as long as this many people need to sleep somewhere warm. Below, the chamber servant wakes for water. In the hall, someone rises toward the garderobe. In the kitchen, an ember settles under ash. The watchman does not see these separate actions, but his route encloses them. The castle is a household held together by people remaining near their tasks. Privacy, food, warmth, and defense are not isolated comforts. They depend on overlapping labor. His own share is to keep moving where the night is coldest. The four strands of the night remain separate in their own rooms and duties, yet the wall contains them physically. His circuit does not warm the hall or cover the bread. It preserves the condition in which those other tasks can continue. Defense at this hour is support for ordinary life below. Below him, all that labor remains unseen, but none of it is unprotected. What you would miss is not the bed, it is the door, and the permission that comes with it. Near the darkest point before dawn, tiredness becomes heavier than cold. He stops at a sheltered angle, not to sleep but to restore attention. He looks at one fixed point, then scans slowly outward. Breath leaves pale in the lantern's limited glow. The wall under his boots has outlasted many watches, but that endurance can mislead. Masonry is not awake. He is. The human being remains the fragile, necessary part of the fortress. He rubs one thumb across the other palm, then resumes before comfort becomes stillness. The darker sky offers no spectacle. It asks only that he continue distinguishing wall from void, roof from cloud, and expected shadow from movement. His attention narrows to the next 10 paces, and then the next. The next corner offers shelter for 3 breaths before the open walk receives him again. The work of the day begins in the service end and moves outward, reaching the private chambers last. A change appears first in the sky rather than the ground. Black becomes deep grey above one edge of the horizon. Roofs separate from darkness. The wall walk gains texture. The watchman can see the next tower without imagining its outline. Dawn does not end duty at once. It changes what can be checked. He looks again at the approach, the gate yard, the roofs, and the line of wall. Familiar shapes return one by one. Bird sound may begin beyond the walls, faint enough at first to be mistaken for another small creak. He does not use it as a clock. He uses the returning light. Details that vanished after sunset reappear without urgency. Wet stone, worn step edges, timber grain, and the familiar line toward the gate. The eastern edge brightens without color, then holds its pale line above the fields. Everyone who slept on this floor is already at work, and nobody will mention the night unless something went wrong in it. When the relief arrives, recognition is easier in the growing light. The watchman reports a quiet night, the condition of gate and wall, and any small matter needing attention. Then he descends toward the waking yard. The payoff is modest and complete. The castle's defensive grandeur has spent the night as a sequence of cold human rounds. Nothing happened because vigilance did not require an event to justify it. In the hall, bedding is being rolled. In the solar, the servant has hidden the low bed. In the kitchen, ash protects a red thread of fire. Dawn gathers all 4 stories without adding another. The relieved man receives the round rather than merely replacing a body. Information passes with the position. What was checked? What changed? What stayed ordinary? What should be mentioned to the constable or gate staff? Only after that transfer does the first watchman's responsibility loosen. He walks down into warmer, busier air. Behind him, the wall walk is already becoming the next man's ordinary morning duty. The hall stands empty for a short while between its 2 jobs, which is the only time it is ever genuinely quiet. The hall is quiet in memory now. A low fire rests beneath ash. Folded cloth lies where a sleeping place had been, and the long floor stretches from screen to high end. The sounds that moved through it have softened into breathing. A latch. One careful step between blankets. Nothing needs to be claimed again. The place beside the warmth is already known. The benches have returned to their straight lines. Near the hearth, the grey surface holds one softer point of colour, then covers it again. A cloak rests over an arm. A rolled pallet waits beside the wall. The hall keeps no argument about who had the warmer place. Beyond the closed door, bed curtains hang still. A smaller covering has been folded away, the chest shut, the water set down. Firelight touches cloth and withdraws. The room keeps the shape of people who rested there without holding their voices. The threshold remains, but no message crosses it now. The larger bed remains behind its hanging, the lower one no longer in view. On the floor, the small clear space beside the threshold has returned. The light makes no demand on the latch. Cloth, timber, stone, and the quiet vessel beside the bed stay in their accustomed positions. In the kitchen, the great heat has narrowed to a hidden red line. Pots stand where hands left them. Boards are clear, vessels turned, stores covered. The passage to the hall is empty. Smoke thins above the hearth, and the last warmth stays close to stone. Near the drain, no water moves. A peel leans back from the oven mouth. The counted tools remain together, and the fuel for morning lies apart from the banked hearth. The kitchen has not vanished into perfect stillness. It has simply reached the quiet prepared by many completed hands. Along the wall walk, the sky continues to pale. The parapet, tower, roof and gate return as calm outlines. Footsteps have passed on. The wind moves over the same cold surface and finds no loose cloth to lift. Below, the castle gathers itself into morning without hurry. The route from gate to tower lies visible in the thin light. Each turn is the same turn the watchman knew in darkness, only gentler at the edges. The well, the roofs, the yard, and the wall remain together below the paling sky, held without alarm or announcement. Keep only the familiar images now. Ash over embers, rushes under folded bedding, a curtain drawn close, a covered store, a grey wall meeting early light. Let them remain where the night left them, each task finished, each doorway still. The fire is low. The room around you can be dim. Nothing more is asked of the castle, or of you. The long hall, the curtained chamber, the covered bread, and the cold parapet can settle beside one another. Ember, cloth, vessel, latch, and early stone need no further movement. The last footstep has reached the stair. The last door rests in its frame. The familiar night is complete.